Hey there guys, it's Metron. I just want to make a quick video showing, giving my thoughts on what's changing with this coming reset, because there's a lot of stuff that's actually being nerfed or changed in the coming reset. So just want to go through all of it. We'll take a look at it. We actually have a change to Visit Doom as well. There's going to be a couple things like this where they're actually changing the visual of a mechanic, which is kind of interesting. Honestly, didn't even know the Shadow Phlegm thing did, but as you're going to see, there's going to be a purple swirly that you can dodge now. The way it works is they actually buffed it as well. The damage has been increased, but they made the splash radius much smaller, and the area targets are now visible with the purple swirly, and the projectile now takes 2 seconds to land. So yeah, apparently used to have no telegraph whatsoever. And I guess back in Legion, you probably were able to move from it if you knew it was coming, but yeah, now it's a much different game. So they're going to go ahead and add a little bit more telegraphing to that. So that's pretty generous, but then that leads on to a lot more interesting stuff here. Now, I already made a video on a cheese strategy. Unfortunately, that is no longer possible. And we actually have, a whole video on this, fighting them in the corner here. It's funny that they actually have the traps, but at the time, yeah, there was no traps whatsoever. Or maybe this is the actual updated situation, but yeah, regardless, no traps, no mechanics. All of these things didn't happen. And yeah, this is actually something that I didn't want to include in the video, but I predicted how this was happening in the first place. There's basically a event that's forcing the bosses to cast a mechanic, and you were actually out of line of sight of that. And so now literally all they did was make them not need line of sight to do these things. Kind of an easy fix. And I don't know, people were telling me that this has been in the game since WoD, but I actually don't believe them. I don't remember doing it, but regardless, yeah. So now that that video is pretty much invalidated. I don't actually know what's gonna happen in that dungeon or what's gonna happen with that boss. But yeah, you're gonna have to go back to doing that boss the same way that you're supposed to, which I actually am in favor of, by the way. Obviously, there was a huge exploit, I feel like. They also changed this boss here, the last boss of Grimrail. We have a much more telegraphed ability here. This was actually, from what I could tell, non-dodgeable. They had already nerfed it once, and I felt like that was enough, but yeah, it's pretty silly. You literally just have one tank alive at the end of every fight of this dungeon. So there's a lot of different ways that you could potentially do this fight, but almost all of them are just going to be over-tuned, and you're just going to take a bunch of avoidable damage. So it says the freezing snare has a new animation, including a massive beam of light. So you'll actually see that giant beam of light there. We have the diffuse energy zones are now telegraphed after the thunderous breath, allowing players to move out. So before, you had no actual way of knowing where they were going to spawn. You could move, but you might end up moving into them. And then the spinning spear now shows a stunned indicator when hit by the attack, which is just, that shouldn't happen. You should not be getting hit by that, but just in case. So that boss has become a lot easier. They're also nerfing the raid bosses, but that's not something we typically talk about much. But yeah, they're making enemy health reduced by 5%. So yeah, we feel this health reduction will smooth over some of the roughest edges in the raid without devaluing the experience 5%. I mean, I don't know how big of a deal that is, but there's even more interesting stuff. Let's take a look first at the trinket tuning, and we'll see, if any of these are interesting. Oh, yes, they are. So I'm actually using this trinket, and I have to say that I'm not really sure how good it is. I actually kind of like the concept of it, flat verse. I think that's really good for Blood DK. And there's not a lot of great options for trinkets. I made multiple videos on trinkets, and now it says versatility increased by 96%. Are they talking about the stat that's on there passively, or are they actually talking about the proc? Because the proc was a 12% damage reduction every time I use it. I mean, I'm going to take that. That seems pretty solid. So if that's 96% more, I mean, what does that mean? That a 20% damage reduction? I don't know what that actually means. I'm a huge fan of that, though. Both are all of them are within Iron Docks, I think. Maybe not. Maybe one of these is a Grimrail, but yeah, the WoD dungeon trinkets are being buffed. So that's pretty crazy. And this was actually the most interesting. So let's take a look at this here. We actually have a lot of changes here, okay? So Blizzard has announced upcoming changes to Mythic Dungeon Weekly Reset, including massive nerfs to Lower Kara, Iron Docks, and Upper Kara, and more. So let's take a look at all of this, because this is where it gets very interesting. Shrouded nightmare clouds will now despawn more quickly when Nathrazim are captured, and that's very nice of them, because the amount of times I ran into one after the mob was over, kind of high. So all right, all good. Shadow Flame damage is increased, so this is what we talked about already. This is also listed here. Grimrail Technician, so those are the mobs at the start of Grimrail that cast 50,000 volts. It's been increased to 3.5 seconds. Not really needed. 2.5 seconds is plenty of time to interrupt that, but okay, that makes it even easier to interrupt. And what it should do is theoretically make it harder for them to fail, for you to fail to them, because now this cast will take longer and the subsequent cast will just be pushed back. We have a lot of changes to Iron Docks here. Charging Slash is now only cast by Gromgar foot soldiers. This is one of the most dangerous mechanics in the dungeon. I'm not really sure what they mean by only cast by Gromgar foot soldiers. Maybe there was other mobs in the dungeon that were also doing it. If you guys know, let me know. And their Charging Slash has also been reduced by 35%. And that was very difficult. You can actually like kind of stop them from hitting you in different ways, but for most people, it was just getting hit by that. Ogron's Laboring, Thunder Stomp damage reduced. These are really, really dangerous. Like, these mobs are so dangerous to fight on their own. So that feels pretty fair because that was an AoE. Thunderlord Wrangler's Throw is now reduced by armor. And if you guys did keys last season, or last week, I mean, this last week that just ended, you would probably remember getting slaughtered by these mobs. These guys hit really, really, really hard. And I guess it was probably just bugged if they're saying it's now reduced by armor. Like, why would it not have been? And then the Rampaging Clefthoof has actually had its health reduced by 15%. That seems quite fair to me, because honestly, it's actually really weird that those areas of the dungeon are very, very strange. You fight very few mobs, and they're all very dangerous. And then that Clefthoof is just kind of running around doing whatever he wants. That seems like a fair change. They also note about the bugged thing that we made the video on that's no longer going to be possible, where the areas would bosses would fail to cast abilities in specific locations within their encounter area. Probably somebody will just find some new cheese on that, to be honest. So keep an eye on it. Anyway, let's see the lower Kara changes. This is very, very interesting. So here we go. Arcane Warden's volatile charge damage reduced by 40%. That is very, very, very good. And honestly, it's crazy that it got to this point. It was actually almost one-shotting people. We did 21 and 21 fortified, and it was hitting people for like 90% of their health at least, if not 100%, and just they were reducing some of it. We have the ushers being reduced, which is interesting. I probably won't change the route. Honestly, the thing about the flashlight is not the damage it does or the health pool of them. It's that you cannot pull them together, because if you have 4 of them together and they're all casting the flashlight at 4 different times, you can't attack them. You have to constantly dodge it, so that's really annoying. We have Spectral Patron's Uppercut reduced by 20%. Actually unfamiliar with what that mob is. Spectral Patron, I don't know. But Uppercut, I don't really know. Honestly, the trash count in here is what's hard. It's not really the actual, it's not really actually the damage. Looks like this caught my eye here. Resolve an issue that caused Blood Death Knight's Dancing Rune Weapon to strike unintended targets with blood boil through floors. Wow, that's great. I have not had that issue. That's not been an issue to me at all. And then the Phantom Crew's Hammer Down now has a 1.5 second cast time and increases damage taken. Oh yeah, okay. So okay, so like, you know, the thing that needed to be nerfed was probably just remove the guardsman. I mean, like, that's kind of crazy. They probably should make the frontal from the guardsman happen less. None of those things were issues whatsoever, but there's more. Coggleston's Dent Armor now has a 1.5 second cast time. And the Bloody Fork thing, the Fork's Bloody Jab, the damage reduced, initial damage has been reduced. So yeah, again, I did this dungeon a bunch this week, and on Fortified, I was getting killed by this boss. Like, I actually died this boss on Fortified. That should never happen, okay? That's just ridiculous. This dungeon was way overtuned, and okay, I'm glad they're finally getting around to some of the stuff. The Dent Armor thing is still probably going to do a ton of damage to you and be very dangerous, but now at least you know it's coming. I was basically relying on DBM to know that. Maiden of Virtue, Holy Bulwark, Absorb reduced by 10%. Will it be enough? They already nerfed it once, and it didn't really make a dent, to be honest. And I'm just going to say this right now. You know, I'm all for challenging content, but I do not think you should be wiping to bosses numerically on a Fortified week. Like, that's just ridiculous. And that happened many times. We actually had multiple keys get to Maiden with a full time to upgrade it, and we wipe and not to spam, but the key is out of time. We're wiping to a numerical check on a fortified boss. That's just silly. I think it should be a lot more reduced, to be honest, because I don't really know what else you can do other than just do DPS, right? People have tried like, oh, killing, let's do Lust on the first one and then CDs on the second, or whatever, vice versa. Let's do all these things. People are like, you can, obviously you can avoid it. Somebody was like, you want to make sure that you have the dot well in advance, so the bulk of the healing doesn't come through the debuff. It's like, I mean, like, how many freaking hoops are we gonna jump through, dude? The fight is overtuned, right? Like, that's all there is to it. You should not fail a DPS requirement on a fortified boss. That just should not happen. If you're upgrading at 21 and you're failing fortified DPS requirements, something's wrong. That's just the way I feel about it. So, maybe Blizzard agrees. I don't know. They're being very light with their nerfs on this boss, and I think this boss is just completely out of control. And hopefully this will change. But I mean, 10%, that's helpful. But now we're back to Tyrannical, so presumably it's still going to be a crazy issue. But at least on Tyrannical, I can understand it. Bosses are supposed to be hard. They're supposed to be the hard part. Anyway, intangible presence on Atumen the Hunter has been reduced. That's the Dispel, I believe. I don't know. That does a lot of damage, I guess. So yeah, pretty bad. We have the Flame Bringer's cleave and strike damage reduced. That is actually very interesting. And Wrathguard Flame Bringer will now no longer cast Slide. I have to take a look at that because I'm actually not aware. Is that him? Is that him charging? Is that what actually that is? Because if so, that's a pretty big deal. A strike slide. The caster quickly dashes to a location. Oh wow. So does that mean he does not drop threat anymore? Because if so, that really changes my opinion on pulling him and not pulling him. I think it's still kind of inefficient to do, and I think it's still a good idea to skip him. But that's very interesting that they would do that. That's removing a whole mechanic, seemingly. Now, I don't know for sure. Let me know what you guys think in the comment down below. But here, this is what Faxi and I were talking about a lot this week. Guardian's Image Shimmer damage has been reduced. That one does need to happen for sure. 25%. It's very dangerous, and the longer the phase goes, the harder it gets. So that's a pretty fair number. 25 seems like the right number to me. And we also have Energy Discharge from the third boss, Mana Devourer. I mean, whatever. That boss, I don't really think that's a hard fight at all. Did I think it need to be nerfed? No, not at all. Especially not compared to some of the bosses in the game right now. But okay, good stuff. We also have Invigorating Fish Stick's cast time was reduced to, or increased to 2 seconds. So that's pretty cool. That's nice. It's a lot easier to get that now. Big problem for me is Blood DK. The global would also, if it's a 1.5 second cast, and the global, you have a very limited window there where you can actually stop them from casting it as Blood DK, especially when you're hard spamming that hard strike. So what do I think? I think all of this is nice. We'll see how it plays out. I think they do need to take one more look. Third time's a charm. Third try, best try, as Arno used to say. Holy Bulwark. Absorb reduced now by, I think it's 40% total. Probably still going to be ridiculous. I saw some people said something like, wow, they really nerfed Lower Karazhan. Nah, not really. I mean, none of this really matters, to be honest. It really doesn't. If you want to nerf the dungeon, add a couple more minutes to it. I mean, I kind of feel that way about Iron Docks, too. Some of this trash definitely is overpowered. But they've just made this dungeon is going to be a lot harder now. Because you're turning that, 3-minute boss fight into, a 1-minute boss fight with that cheese, and now that's gone. So, yeah. There's better ways to nerf these dungeons. These are not big nerfs at all. The Grimrail changes, some of these changes are nice. They're good. They're quality changes. And now that I realize this, that's something I actually mentioned what we already talked about here with the last boss of Grimrail. So, what is that? But yeah, I don't really know, man. I just don't really think it's going to make that big of a difference. And I think, I wouldn't be too excited about a lot of this stuff, but it's good that they're being receptive, and I hope that, they'll continue to iterate where needed. But right now, keys are very fun, man. It's just Lower Kara. That one's just a big wall, and I don't really know how you solve that, to be honest. So let me know what you guys think. Otherwise, we'll see you guys soon.